I don't do much in the way of podcasting anymore, but I had an opportunity recently that I couldn't pass up. A chance to talk with Sharman, an elite ultra runner, a running coach, and an author. So this is an interview with Ian talking about his upcoming book, The Art of Ultrarunning. There's plenty to learn. I hope you enjoy. Guys, I'm sitting here with Ian Sharman of Sharman Ultra Coaching, and Ian is no stranger to ultra running and running long distances. He has recently written a book on the art of ultra running, and I'm very keen to get his ideas on how to approach the sport. And I love the fact that you've given it the title, The Art of Ultrarunning. Kind of implies that there's a bit more to this than just the physiology, right? Yeah.
Sorry. Well, thanks for having me on the show. But yeah, I mean, the whole point is that this is kind of how you do it in practice. So there's one thing of this is what works in a lab. And there's another thing of, well, how do you actually do things when it's, insanely hot and you've been out there for 20 hours and your stomach's queasy? It's not just here is the exact answer. Instead, it's being able to get enough experience to deal with different situations. As a coach, a lot of my job really is helping give people the skill set, not just the knowledge to deal with stuff.
We say coaching, but you also have a pretty deep pedigree. Some of my homework, I came across the fact that you are in the Guinness Book of Records for the fastest marathon time in an Elvis suit. What was that all about?
I think it's either 9 or 10 Guinness World Records I've broken. I think the only one I for some reason still hold is Elvis. And that's only because it's insanely difficult to break these records. Not because they're hard to do, they're hard to prove. So if you want to break one of them now, you have to apply to Guinness. It takes 6 months for them to get back to you. And then you have to do things like get the race director to sign off on it. You need someone who's measured the course to sign off on it. You need video of you the whole way through the race. You need signed witness statements. So it used to be a lot easier. They've tightened up those rules, but now it's almost impossible to get these unless you run at the London Marathon, which is where I did it first, because Guinness is based in London, and so they are there in person. But it was a lot more fun. Now it's a lot of admin to try and do these things.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're based in the States, right? And you've been based there for quite a while, but clearly you can hear you're not American born. What was the journey? How did you get there?
Yes, I'm a Brit, obviously. First 29 years of my life, I was in the UK. I got into ultra running in the last few years of that. And then I met a girl who was in Oregon, and we got married a few years after we met. But she happened to live in a town called Bend in Oregon, which I didn't realize how amazing it is, but it's a massive trail running hub. We have 300K world champions who live in town. We have Olympians who live in town. I think one of the years when I was at Western States, we had 3 of the top men and 3 of the top women from this small town. So we were like one of the key places for ultra running in the US, particularly the trail side of things. Yeah, so I've been here now since 2009. I have loved coming to South Africa as well. I've done 8 Comrades. I've done 1 Two Oceans. I've done 1 trail race. I did the Two Oceans trail race and then the Two Oceans road race the first year they had the trail option there. But I definitely want to do more stuff in South Africa as well. And one of the things I love about this sport is the travel element of being able to go to basically pick an amazing place, find a race there, and then you get to see new stuff that'll be spectacular. And particularly for trail running, you'll get deep into these beautiful places.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also get to do those in a short span of time. So what would amount to a 5-day hike in the mountains now turns into a 24-hour jaunt through the mountains, and you see the same stuff. Mostly.
Exactly. And one of my favorite things is something like running the rim to rim to rim at the Grand Canyon. It's about a 45-mile run, so about 60K. And it's just a beautiful thing to see. But most people have to get a permit months in advance for camping, and then they have to carry all this extra weight, and it takes them 3 days or 4 days. Or if you're an ultra runner, you just rock up, do it, no permits, dead easy. You just need enough fitness to be able to do that.
Yeah. You mentioned Western States a little earlier. You've finished 10, right? And
yes.
In the top 10, 9 of those, the story of the one that you didn't quite make the 10 out of 10?
Yes, that's in the book. In fact, the first book, the one where I do the Grand Slam, which is 400 miles, is in the book, and also the 10th one. And the 10th one being one that unfortunately was a bit of a disappointment. I came 15th, so I wasn't able to continue that top 10 streak. But there were mistakes that were made. The biggest one probably being just that I used some old sponsor food. So I just finished working with Cliff Bar the year before. I still have, and you don't want to waste things. You don't want to throw it away. but it had expired. And I thought, 6 months passed, it'll be fine.
That's
But
fine.
that was not good. And it didn't work well on my stomach. And so I was very queasy and had to throw up a few times in the latter stages of the race. So, and it wasn't a particularly hot year at Western States. So when it's a hot year, there's carnage. People blow up. You can gain a few extra places just by not making big mistakes. And I could probably have got away with it then. But because it wasn't hot, no one was giving me anything. And so I had to be able to run hard at the end to be able to stay in the top 10. And I think I was in 10th at about 100K, but with my stomach and just everyone else running so well, I just couldn't hold on to it. And it was frankly soul destroying. But this is one of the things that comes out in the book. It's how do you make the best of a bad day? How do you still do a good run? And, I was about an hour slower than I'd expected to be, which is not horrendous, but in a competitive race, that's going to cost you a few places. But in the moment, I was really quite demoralized because I kind of assumed I was going to be top 10 again. I even had one of my sponsors, Ultra Aspire, they were making a video about that year because it was the 10th one. So there's all this extra pressure as well. But I had to find other ways to stay motivated. And in the book, I explain how I moved the targets throughout the day to still be what's the best that I could do. And so initially I'm going in hoping to win, or at least, be on the top 3 or so. Then top 10, when that isn't looking possible. Other goals could I give myself to stay motivated? And how could I move that target? So some of those were position-based, some of those were time-based. Because it was my 10th one, I had some goals about the total time for the 10 finishes. And in particular that no one had ever done 10 finishes under 1 week of total time, so 7 full days of cumulative time. And I knew I had to do something like 18 and a half hours to do that. So that was another backup goal. And then it's, okay, can I go under 18? Can I go into 17 hours? And I was just trying to give myself these adjusted targets to stay in the game. And it wasn't enough to give me loads of excitement. A lot of it was, I was quite deflated, but it was enough to make me not give up. And so that's one of the lessons in the book is, things don't go well every time in ultras. I did well to have 9 good Western States, and then that 10th one wasn't even my slowest, but it was outside the top 10. And so how can you rescue a bad day? And my aim for myself and the people I coach is that their bad day is someone else's good day, and that they're giving themselves a range of possible outcomes that are from excellent to good, and that because they can deal with stuff, and because I can hopefully deal with stuff, you never get a properly bad day. And that takes a lot of kind of adjusting mentally through the day, problem solving. And yeah, that wasn't my best race, but it also wasn't a horrible race. 15th of Western States is still a good result.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because reading through the book and kind of, I've listened to you on podcasts and stuff. You come across initially as a very deliberate person. It's not quite as deliberate. You have a lot of learning to trust your instinct, learning to trust yourself. So how do you balance those two things? I'm going to plan for this. I'm going to run this pace. I'm going to hit these targets and then bring in that sense of feel at the same time.
I don't think those two things are in conflict. I mean, the way that you do a good race is you focus on the good process of doing a good race. You don't just say, okay, I want to run this time, so these are the splits I have to run, or at any race, whether it's a flat road race where it'll be even splits, or a mountain race where the paces are going to be changing throughout the whole day. You've got to have an idea about roughly when you're going to get to different places for logistics, for your crew, for night and day, temperatures, and being able to manage and work things out for that. But you've also got to be flexible enough. And this is one of the things that one of the stories in the book from Courtney Dauwalter that really shows this. So she's obviously one of the best ultra runners of all time. She's been so successful. Every race she goes into, she's expected to win and get the course record. So the question I had to her is, how do you deal with that pressure? Because we all have pressure. She has more because she's got the media and sponsors and probably 1 million people watching what she's doing. But we all have friends and family. We've things that we've said of, we want to do better than last time. We want to beat this person. So there's always some degree of external and internal pressure that we put on ourselves. But the way that she races is exactly the way that I try and race. And it was kind of a leading question because I didn't know for certain her answer, but I guessed it. It's that you don't focus on the outcome. You focus on how do you get deep into the race in one piece, and then you deal with the adversity when you get there. So Courtney doesn't worry if she's in the lead or if she's on course record splits. She's just trying to look after herself, get to the next aid station feeling good, problem solve. Exactly the mentality and the philosophy that I have behind things, knowing that in an ultra, or really any race, it's going to get tough at the end. Even in a 5K, if you're running it hard and to the best of your ability, it's going to be difficult near the end, just not for very long. But the same principle applies there, which is look after yourself, Trust your judgment and your experience of what is sustainable and how to fix things. Just do that process really well. Get deep into the race, then it'll get difficult. And in an ultra, that can be a whole number of things that are getting extremely difficult. You know, the mental side, crashed legs, stomach problems, any number of things. And the longer the race is, the more things can go wrong. But that's the bit that's kind of interesting. And to her, it's not interesting, can she win? It's interesting, how can she deal with the hard bit? And so her phrase that people may have heard is the pain cave.
Yeah.
I've heard many different ways of describing that. I mean, the tagline for my company is literally embrace the suck, with SUC being Sharman Ultra Coaching as well. But the idea being that that's why we do it. We know it's going to be hard, but if you go out and just hit some splits and then you blow up and walk it in with your head down, that's not really the point of it. Yeah, well done, you got to finish. That's much better than a DNF. But to do it well is to deal with the adversity well. And that's only going to happen if you can get deep into the race, fixing things well, and staying on track enough that you're not completely destroyed nearer the end and you can still race. And that might be racing the clock, might be racing other people, might be just dealing with a load of stuff, feeling horrible and not giving up and just mentally being willing to keep going. So that's what I'm saying. It's not really in conflict, the idea of having goals and saying, well, I'm here to win the race. I'm here to do well, or I'm going to try and beat my time from last year. But the way I'll do that is I will focus on using that goal as motivation to train hard for the 6 months before. At the start line, kind of move that goal to the side and say, now my aim is to have a good process, get to the next aid station feeling as good as possible, staying on top of everything, getting deep into the race before it gets really hard. And then you flip into kind of race mode and say, okay, it's hard now. This is why we're here. And I would literally have that happen in my 100 milers when I'm maybe 70 odd miles in. I'd be thinking, okay, well, now it's starting to feel tough. This is why you're here. Game on. I mean, I literally say to myself, this is why you get paid. This is why you're sponsored, because you can do this bit well. Everyone can run well 5 minutes into the race. No one's tired, no one's struggling, but can you run well when it gets difficult? And that's the satisfying bit, as well as the thing that gives you a good result. But I'm glad that Courtney thought of it that way. I assume she'd have to, because she just wouldn't be as successful if that wasn't her approach. And that was the whole point I was trying to make in that chapter, is that that's how you do it. Whether you're the front of the pack, the back of the pack, you've got to be able to deal with a good process through the day and look after yourself to be able to do anything remotely fast near the end. Another phrase that I use commonly is, it's your slowest mile that matters, not your fastest mile. Change that to kilometers if you want. It's the same idea. But who cares if you go 30 seconds a kilometer quicker through the first 10K? Saves hardly any time. But maybe you're working a little bit too hard. What matters is when you're going up that climb, 2/3 the way through the race, your stomach feels bad, your legs are sore, and there's the difference between someone who's still moving well and does a reasonable power hike and someone who is death marching, or the slowest pace you'll do, sitting at the aid station for 2 hours, feeling sorry for yourself and not moving at all.
First of all, that phrase, embrace the suck, it's one that resonates with me as well. And you're not in conflict with the difficulty. You're bringing it in and embracing it and letting it sharpen you at the end of the day, right? That's what that difficulty is doing.
Yeah, I mean, in the US, there's the phrase type 2 fun, which means something's fun because it's a challenge. So, I mean, that describes ultra running in its totality. But I think a lot of people who aren't runners, they go, well, but that's not enjoyable. You're just suffering, or your legs are sore, or you're tired. That's not fun. They think fun is when you're happy and things are relaxing and easy. That's type 1 fun. That is a type of fun. But there's also that value from doing something difficult. And that's the whole reason we do this sport. I mean, yes, we want to see scenery. We want to have that camaraderie in the social side. But ultimately, what keeps us in the sport is because it's not easy. A 100 miler, and every time it goes perfectly and it's not difficult, it wouldn't have the same value. We just wouldn't care about it as much. And so it's that ability to say we like it because we know it'll be meaningful, to have done it well. And to be honest, I struggle with that idea of embracing it when it's difficult. I think some of the ultra runners like Courtney, they genuinely kind of enjoy the bit that's just insanely difficult when they're suffering. I don't love that. I love the feeling of getting over that. But in the moment, that is not what I'm there for. I'm there just to deal with that and minimize it as well as I can. And that's where my satisfaction is. So it's a subtly different thing. And in some ways, I say maybe I'm not embracing the suck in the moment, but I'm embracing the concept of it as being valuable.
Yeah. You also speak about flow. You've got an entire chapter around finding flow. And flow for me it's almost the only reason that I run trail is to find that flow, because it's accessible to everybody when you're trail running.
Because quite frankly, if you're not in flow, you're going to fall. If you're not present and in your body, you're probably going to fall, right? But being properly in flow is really just being challenged and being right on the edge of your comfort zone. You got a great story in the book about your own flow where everything just worked for you. On a day where you weren't expecting to do well, you just had the most amazing experience.
Yes, I think it's worth kind of defining the flow just a little bit more. It's something that can only occur when you have some mastery of something. So it can occur out of sport, it can occur in sport in particular. I remember probably the first time I felt it was when I was maybe about 12 years old, 13 years old. I scored a goal in soccer. And it's one of those ones where the ball comes in and you're like, I've just got to hit this perfectly, and it'll go right in the top corner. And your brain almost switches off. You do it on autopilot, and afterwards it's like, that worked exactly. I almost don't remember doing it, but I was there. Like you're out of the body while your body's just doing it. But the idea is it's something where you've got to have done things enough. So a beginning runner is not going to feel flow. They just don't have the fitness for that. Once you've got better at running, you've got more fitness, you can get into that groove of something that you're comfortable doing because you've done it well and because you've got enough experience of it. And so in a long trail race, that should happen to some degree in the early stages. Prepared to go 100K, 100 miles, then early on, it's not very difficult. It's well within stuff that you've trained for, and you can kind of get in that groove where the kilometers just fly by. You don't really have to think about it too much. Everything's feeling fairly relaxed. You can be talking to people. Sometimes you almost feel like you're gliding over the trail. Sometimes the time goes by without you really noticing. I think the example in the book is Rocky Raccoon, which was one of my is my second 100 mile. I'd had a 100 miler at Western States and had a top 10 there. And then I go to Rocky Raccoon. It just happened to be a very competitive race. Some of the top names in the sport at that time were there. So it was 2011, Krapicka, Scott Jurek, Karl Meltzer. These are all guys who are absolute top of the sport. And this was them pretty much at their peak.
Yeah.
And so I'm just happy to be there. It's like, oh, this is cool. Hopefully I'll get to run with them and chat to them. And in that early stage where we're all going at an easy effort, it'll be fun to get to meet these guys. And it was really cool just to settle into that. But it was only the first 10K where I got to run with them, because then one of them stops, goes to the toilet, and they all think, oh, we'll all do that. I didn't need to go. So I just kept running. And suddenly I'm in second place. And there's one guy who was the reigning champion, I think, from Badwater 135 miler in the Death Valley extreme heat, a guy called Zach Gingrich, and he was ahead, but it was just me on my own. And for the rest of the day, it was me on my own. I just kind of settled into a rhythm. I assumed the guys behind, because they're so talented, were going to catch me. So I wasn't trying to break away. I wasn't trying to catch Zach ahead of me. I was just doing my own thing, feeling very comfortable. I knew I was fit, but also I knew these were much better 100 milers than me, and that it probably wouldn't go perfectly. Zach ended up dropping a little bit later, and so I passed him at about 50K. The other guys, I gradually kept just getting a little bit further ahead because, again, I was focused on that process. And part of the reason I was able to have that flow and focus on the process is I wasn't getting paranoid or worrying about how fast am I going? What are my splits? How far ahead am I? All these things that can take you out of the moment. Instead, I was just thinking, okay, let's just keep going as long as I can. I assume they'll catch me. And when they do, hopefully I can keep running with them. But it's sometimes about taking the pressure off that allows you to get into that groove. If you're at a race and you're constantly looking at your watch and you're checking your heart rate and your pace, you're kind of on edge. You're going to be a little bit more frazzled than someone who can just relax and say, I know what it should feel like. I'll just get into that groove. And that's where flow occurs.
Yeah.
And I remember there's actually a photo from probably 2/3, 3/4 of the way in, where I've run through an aid station, I've eaten a gel, and there's just a box for trash on the side. And I wasn't even looking at it, but the photo captures me looking straight ahead, throwing it to the side and just going in the box. And again, it's that just everything's clicking. Everything's just in that nice groove. And it still got a little bit difficult towards the end, but I didn't really slow down and nothing was majorly causing problems, and it ended up being a course record. But that was kind of one of the first times I really saw it come into play about how important it is to do my race, to not worry about the other people, to not try and stick with people just for the sake of it, especially early on, to just not really worry about the race until you get near the end. Then you can start focusing on how hard can you push. But most of the time, you're just trying to get in that groove, whether it's road running, trail running, really long stuff, shorter stuff. It's got to feel like something you've practiced and that you can do well. And at some point it gets harder, and then you come out of that flow. Then you start going, oh yeah, my legs hurt now. My stomach doesn't feel good. It's not going to be flow at that point.
Yeah.
But the longer it is in that groove, the better the race is likely to go, because you're going to be going at a decent pace and you're going to get deeper into the race before it gets difficult too.
But you've got to have the mastery first to be able to relax into that knowledge that the pace you're running at is sustainable and that you're going to be able to manage it so that those problems aren't there. And as soon as you start thinking about those kinds of things, you're no longer in flow, which is why you spend a lot of time training, a lot of plenty of time out there.
Practice races, let's say you're doing your first 100 mile, your first 100K. You don't go into that having never run more than 2 hours. You're not going to have any idea what that's meant to feel like. You're not going to have the fitness. And so the build-up races and the years of running experience you gain from racing in particular gives you much better ideas about, okay, well, I went off too fast last time. How did that feel? Now I can improve because I just don't want it to feel that hard. And it gives you a better sense of all the signals your body should be receiving and when to make adjustments. And it's not like it's on autopilot. So there's kind of the intrinsic and the extrinsic things you're looking at here. So extrinsic might be looking at your watch for pace. Intrinsic might be your breathing and how you're feeling. But you're trying to manage both of those in a way that feels like you're used to it. And so in training, you're trying to get fitter, but you're also practicing that skill set of reading the signals from the body, working out when there were warning signs, what things have held you back in the past, and what can you learn from those races to do it better this time.
And you touch on that a lot in the opening chapters of the book, is just that sense of while you're training, train consciously, be in touch with what you're doing and what it feels like and what you're trying to achieve with every session. It's not just a random go out and run. I'm going to do base miles, so I'm just going to get 100 Ks in for the week and that'll be good. It's more than that.
You've got to be seeing how you're feeling each day. Are you recovering well enough? Are you pushing hard enough in the speed session? Have you gone off too fast in the speed session? It won't be sustainable. So you're practicing this judgment all the time, every single run. It doesn't mean that you're hyper-focused and you're just looking at data and stats the whole time. It means you're just being aware of the information that your brain is being fed. Some of it to do with pace, yep, that's definitely part of it, but most of it from what your body's telling you. And does the training feel sustainable? Do you feel more tired than last week? Are you tighter than you were yesterday? Are you recovering better from yesterday's speed session than the one from last week? And just trying to put it all in the right context. So it is very purposeful. It's thoughtful. This is kind of related to the 10,000 hours concept, the Malcolm Gladwell thing. There's a lot of debate about the precise element of that, but the key idea is that to get good at something, you don't just do it, you do it with thought. So if you're practicing an instrument, you don't just go through the motion, your brain's thinking about other things. You've got to be thinking about, how did that note work? Was that right? Was I a little bit late? And by doing that, that's where you're getting the actual practice that adds up and helps. And the same with running. If you're thinking about, how does this feel? Is this appropriate pacing? What can I learn from last week's speed session? If you're doing it that way, then the practice is so much more valuable.
Yeah. And also then having a coach at your elbow at times helps guide what that should be feeling like and what you should be experiencing.
Yeah, hopefully it gets you further along that learning curve a little bit quicker. Can make you ask the right questions and give you stuff to discuss as well.
Probably even 8 years ago, 100 miles was still considered a long way. It's no longer, it's now an entry-level ultra endurance. You get that sense, 200s, 240s, 250s. How do you train differently for a 200 compared to a 100 miler?
Yeah, it's mainly the same. Like training for a 50K is mainly the same as training for a 100 miler. The physiology is the same, almost identical. Obviously, it's a little bit slower. There's definitely more power hiking involved, so you need to practice that, more time on feet, definitely more practice for varied nutrition because you're not eating from one day, you're eating for multiple days. But this is why I did a chapter about 200 milers, because it is a big part of the sport now. And yes, 200 plus milers, really. Most of them are at least 200 of these big races. As we record this, it's not long ago that Bocadona 250 miler occurred. That's become a major race on the global scene now. Really competitive, a lot of attention to it. To do with people really caring about it. And I think it's just the elements of ultra that appeal to people are doing something kind of crazy and hard. 100 miles have been around long enough that they are still difficult. And I wouldn't call them an entry level. I'd still say, 50K is the entry level ultra distance, but 100 miles has become more normalized. And there's a lot of people who've been doing that for a long time. So they're looking for the next challenge. And there's lots of different directions you can go. In fact, the last part of the book is about longevity in the sport and finding new things, finding excitement and new challenges. That new challenge could be going longer. It could be dealing with sleep deprivation. It could be doing something that's more mountainous than you've done before. It could be doing something faster. It could be going the opposite direction, saying, I've been doing 100 milers, now I want to do 5Ks, just for the sake of variety, just to have a new challenge, to work on speed, to see some gains in something that maybe is relatively less practiced from the past. But yeah, I think 200s, it's just because there's so many people who've done 100 milers now. Well, relatively, we're still in a very niche sport. It's a tiny fraction of the normal population. But within ultra running, 100 miles have kind of become normalized. And so 200s, I think, are just becoming that much more exciting to people. It's that question again of, okay, well, I know I can finish a 100 miler. Can I finish a 200? Not just can I do it fast, but can I even do this? And that provides a lot of excitement and motivation for people to train and to do something that pushes their boundaries a little bit more.
There's something special about standing on a start line and not really knowing whether you're capable of even finishing the event, mind doing well at it.
Well, there's kind of two philosophies, I'd say, to how you do ultra running. One of them is jump into the deep end, do something way beyond what you've ever done, knowing that you don't have the experience or maybe the fitness to guarantee it. And the other one is building up more methodically. And as a coach, I generally advise that more because it's still going to be a big deal. The first time you do a 100 miler, you're still jumping into the deep end, but you might as well have a better preparation. So you've got a better chance of it not being miserable, and it's still going to be difficult to finish. Same things with a 200 miler. Much better, I think, to build up some 100 milers, get a few years of experience, and then move up to that next step if that's what excites you. But that's the thing, there's both ends of the scale there. And I think there's always an element of jumping in at the deep end and it being beyond what you can do, as well as an element of trying to be prepared for it. But that's part of the fun. That is, again, it's embracing the suck, knowing it's going to be difficult and that you just want to see how well you can cope with it.
Yeah. The speeds that, certainly like this year at Cocodona, the speeds that the guys are running at just seem impossible.
It's funny because you can look at it as an average pace or you can look at it in the moment. I would say when I look at some of the 100 miles and below and I see the paces they're running at for that terrain, the top level guys, these are guys who are, 2:15 marathoners. These are very fast people who can go very fast for half a day, really tough stuff that's taking other people the whole day or more than a day. In the 200 milers, the average winning pace, I think it worked out as 13.5-minute miles. So that's something like 8.5, 9-minute kilometers, which is, not fast in the moment. Most runners could be doing that. Most runners could run alongside the leaders of this race, deeper into it without much problem for a little bit. Not for long, but for a little bit, they could stick with them. While you can't run next to Sawe in the marathon at 2-hour pace. Most people could manage a couple of seconds at that pace, and that's all. Never mind even a whole kilometer.
Yeah.
But that thing, it's in relative terms. That is a really good pace to be moving when it's sustained for that long, allowing for the low patches, allowing for stopping at aid stations. And I think when I saw Rachel Entrekin, who won Cocodona 250, she had 19 minutes of sleep in 2.5 days.
Right.
So there's not a whole lot of not moving. But the sleep deprivation also gets much harder the slower you are. If you're out there for a couple of days, you can get away with almost no sleep. If you're not that quick, if it's 3 days or more, you definitely need to sleep a bit more because your body just can't stay awake that long. If you're going to be out there for 6 days, you've got to plan to be sleeping a lot more on day one because you've got to survive for that much longer. The general tactics, I think, change a little bit more in the field for 200s than they would for the shorter ultras, where it's not one size fits all, but there's not as much variety in how you would do a good race.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different aspects to 100 miles. In 200, it almost, they're highlighted, as you say, sleep strategy, how much you're going to eat, where you're going to finish in the field, because, the guys who are going to be finishing in 2.5 days versus the guys who will be finishing in 6 days your pack size is different. For one thing, how much you need to sleep en route, how much you need to eat en route is radically different.
Well, how much to carry, because the aid stations are far apart, much more so than shorter ultras. You might have 50K between aid stations. So if you're walking at a very slow pace, that could be almost most of the day where you're not getting any crewing or aid station help. So you've got to have enough food for that. You've got to have things like filtration straws potentially to be able to drink from streams because you just can't carry enough liquids. So the logistics do add up. The slower you're going, the harder it'll be to manage that. And then kind of like we were discussing there with the Grand Canyon, if you can run it in a day, you can just have a small backpack, water bottle, you can fill it up with the water taps along the way. If you're camping, you need a tent, you need food for several days, you need so much more stuff, which slows you down even more because you have to carry more.
Yeah. Power hiking, you mentioned a couple of times, and it's something that I always associate with you, because somewhere way back, I heard the numbers from you for the first time. You can walk 6.7 Ks an hour. You can walk a mile in 24 hours.
You don't need to go fast to do these long races. You just need to not go slow. Hiking, it can be your backstop. So there's a whole chapter about active recovery and using power hiking and using weight vests and how you can use that just to maybe bump up your volume or to get better at certain elements of it. But if you're doing a longer or a hillier race, it's pretty much inevitable you're going to have to power hike. If you don't practice it, you're not going to be as good at it. I think some people assume that if they get really fit with running and they can run up the hills, then they can hike really well, but it uses the muscles differently. So you've got to put in some meaningful practice to be able to switch between running and hiking, to be able to have a fast power hike. And yeah, you can go at a good power hiking pace even when you feel bad. Well, running at that point might feel very difficult. If you can make your backstop be a strong power hike versus a death march, you can probably knock off 30 minutes in a single kilometer in the difference in pacing for hiking up a hill when you're feeling okay-ish, but your hiking is still working, versus death marching where you stop every few steps, you vomit, you're eating and drinking, and everything feels like it's crushing you mentally and physically. So there's more to be gained from being a good hiker and using that to stop you ever going too slow. But the other part of that is you use the hiking to avoid getting as fatigued in the first place. So you don't wait until you have to have a walking break. And this is why I use the phrase power hiking, because it's a purposeful tactic. It's not a walking break. You're not going to run up the hill as much as you can till you're redlining, you're huffing and puffing, and you have to walk. Because when you do it then, you're already tired, you've worn yourself down more, and the walk is going to be slower. If instead you notice you're going uphill, your effort level's spiking, depending on the length of the race and the gradient, you might drop into the power hike almost immediately and use that to save yourself for later. So it's helping keep the average pace up throughout the whole race, partly through being less tired so you can still move better later, and partly through never going that slow because even when you hike, it's at a decent pace. Deep into races like at Leadville, one of the last climbs there, it's at about almost exactly 3/4 of the way through, you go up something called power line. And I would typically be hiking that because it's steep enough and it's very high altitude for the Leadville race. But my pacers would have to jog next to me because they hadn't practiced power hiking as well. And so my tired legs doing a power hike uphill was their fresh legs doing a gentle jog. And that's the kind of thing you're looking for, that you're never that slow. And power hiking is a really big part of making that possible.
So I'm going to ask you for trade secrets now. Where do you put the power hiking into your training? I mean, how do you fit it in?
It partly depends on what's available, especially if I'm using a weight vest. That's actually a very small proportion of what I do. It's mainly when it's earlier in the season, and I live near mountains, but these are very snowy mountains. And there's about 3 months of the year where I can actually go in them and do hiking and running. The rest of the time I'd need skis, and friends of mine do that and they go there all year round. But it means that, say for Western States, that's the end of June. I can't get to the mountains really till about July. So I can't get the big steep climbs and I can't do as much of that specific training. So instead I might use a weight vest and do smaller hills and add that on as some extra sessions. The amount of weight and the difficulty of that would depend on, am I using it for active recovery, just something easy that boosts my overall volume, or something harder that needs its own recovery. But in general, yeah, I mean, I will use power hiking in all hilly runs that I do. If I'm doing a long run and it's even rolling hills, I'll probably throw in little bits of power hiking there. I'm trying to mimic and practice what I do in a race. And so if I couldn't run all of it in a race, I'm not necessarily going to run all the uphills in a training run unless it's meant to be a higher intensity run, like a speed session, in which case, yes, the purpose is to run them there. But otherwise, I just naturally get a lot of power hiking because I run a lot of hills when I'm training for a trail race. And there's a natural switch between running and hiking to stop my effort level going through the roof and then fading towards the end of the run, taking longer to recover, and also just not being able to trust the power hiking as well because I've not practiced it.
And then poles versus no poles. I don't think I've seen a picture of you or any video of you running with poles.
I've used poles in one race ever. I'm not a fan of them for myself. I'd say that the main things where it'll make a difference are the longer the race is, the more poles are likely to help because you get tired and sore. The hillier it is. So if it's really steep, so maybe a vertical kilometer race where it's straight up the side of a mountain, very steep, poles are more likely to help you deal with that. But and the other reason that it can be useful is if you're a skier. So a lot of the European guys, they do skimo in the winter, and so they're just so used to the poles, it's very natural. So they're the kind of the three main considerations, but it'll help, I think, probably most people. If it is a more runnable race that isn't taking too long, then they're not as necessary. And some of the races I've done in the US, they're not allowed. So Western States has just started allowing poles. The whole time I ran it, I wasn't even allowed to have them. So it wasn't an option. So I'm not going to use them if it's not allowed, of course. And I'm not going to train for them if I'm not able to use them on race day. Some of the downsides to consider are it's harder to eat and drink. So if you've got poles in your hands, it's that extra step, extra bit of effort to get some food, to use a bottle. And particularly if it's a hot race, and a lot of the races I do tend to be quite hot, I need bottles that are full of ice water that I can pour on my head. And so if I've got poles in my hand, it's just that much more difficult to do that. So because of the styles of race I've done and whether it is even allowed, I've not tended to use poles as much. But the longer it is, the steeper it is, and the more you're used to poles, the more they're likely to help. It's also a little bit cultural. I think if you see a European race, pretty much everyone will have poles.
Yeah.
In the US, a smaller proportion will, just because it's not as normal, but it's becoming more normal. But they definitely have the potential to help. It just depends on those factors I've just said.
Yeah. Where do you fall on the high carb scale at the moment?
I mean, there's no doubt that high carb makes a difference for, triathlons, marathons, ultra marathons, and some of the guys who are doing really well. In fact, all the guys who are doing really well are high carb. You cannot run at high intensities for reasonably long periods of time without topping up your carbs well. I think I heard at the London Marathon, Sawe, when he got the sub 2 hour marathon, he did 115 grams per hour of carbs. I heard that Caleb Olson last year at Western States, in his 14-hour win, just off the course record, he did 105 grams per hour of carbs. When I did Rocky Raccoon, I wasn't thinking in terms of grams of carbs, I was thinking in terms of calories. But I was having, for 12 hours, I had 4 gels an hour on average. So I had probably about 50 gels or equivalent in 12 and a half hours. Which I now think of it as like, that's an insane amount of food. I don't know how I ate that amount, but that's probably 100 grams of carbs as well per hour in a 100-miler. I think there's no doubt that it can be helpful. I think there is a nuance for ultra running that most people are not running every step of a mountainous course. They're not doing it in half a day. It's taking longer than that. And so the lower your intensity, the fewer carbs you're burning as a proportion of your fuel sources. You're going to be more burning fat than just carbs. Every runner is burning both, but the lower the intensity, the more it'll be based on fat. So I would say if someone is mainly doing a lot of power hiking in a mountainous 100-miler, 100K, 200-miler, then the amount of the food that has to be carbs is going to be a bit less. You still need to eat lots, get lots of calories in, but I don't think everyone needs to be trying to do 90 or 100 grams per hour. I think it's very difficult to train for. I think part of the success of these top athletes is that they're able to do it. They're genetically able to digest this. So that improves with training, but like their speed, that improves with training, but not everyone has the genes of a 2-hour marathoner who can replicate that. So I think it's not as important to have insanely high numbers if you aren't the fastest people in the world. But probably the simple takeaway is most people probably under 8 in their last ultras. Most people over the last decades weren't prioritizing food enough and therefore were leaving a little bit of their performance out there where if they'd have trained for eating a bit more, they could have been quicker on race day.
100-mile distances plus. Even the research that's out there is still thin, and we just seem to be continually discovering new pieces to add to in times course records keep on falling. It's crazy.
And that's one of the things that's doing it. I think the higher carb is part of the reason that course records keep falling more now and people are getting even faster. Also, there's a higher level of competition. There's no doubt that's having an effect. Maybe there's some doping element to that. It's kind of impossible to say, but that's bound to be helping some runners out there to be a bit faster at least. Who knows who? There's just not really a lot of testing to know that. But yeah, I think that the more carbs, higher competition, people training more, maybe the super shoes are helping them have slightly higher volumes because there's a little bit less muscle damage. That's certainly one of the things the road guys have been saying, that they can train a bit more, which means that all other things being equal, they can be a bit fitter. But, it's a fascinating time to be in the sport because we're also seeing a lot more of these fast road runners coming in. When I went to my first Western States, my marathon PB was 2:32. I'd done it a few months earlier, and I think it was about the quickest in the field. Most of those guys were kind of high 2:30s as their best marathons. None of us had focused on the marathon, so it's not a perfect comparison. But now we're seeing these guys, particularly at the very top level, who are US collegiate 5K runners, 10K runners, marathon runners, who are really fast. They're not
they're
the
running
2-hour guys, but we're getting the 2:10, the 2:15 guys who then do all of the specific stuff for ultras and gain the experience. And if you've got that extra speed, all other things being equal, you will be quicker and you have a higher capability.
Yeah, speed beats everything once you equalize all the rest of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the nice thing, especially with the 200s, is that is more of an equalizer for fitness because execution matters more the longer the race is. And so that's why we had a female winner overall with the overall course record. Not because she's necessarily fitter than the top men at that race, but fitness matters less. It's how well can you look after yourself, your mental game, your pacing, your logistics. All of that adds up to a bigger portion of success there. And this is why a lot of my book is about how you execute races, not just how you get fitter for the start line.
My personal bent at the moment is age-related racing, right? So the longer it gets, the more that experience comes in because it is a matter of saving seconds and minutes and little bits and pieces like getting through an aid station effectively and quickly. 5 minutes at a time, if you've got 16 aid stations, there's an hour and a half saved. These little tiny bits and pieces that you tack on. Pure speed, pure fitness isn't necessarily the only thing that gets you through. You're no longer a young man, but you're still competitive. Do you see yourself racing for, 70s, 80s? When are you going to stop racing?
Hopefully never. My aim is to be able to do this for forever. Obviously, I will slow down over time. At this point, I'm just starting to maybe slow down a bit. I'm still aiming to do fast marathons. I'm going to go to Comrades next year for the 100th running, hopefully do my fastest time ever there. My last run when I was 42, I'm 45 now, was my quickest Comrades ever out of the 8 times. The nice thing about ultras and distance running is that your endurance fades slower than your power and speed. If you're a sprinter, if you're in a power sport, if you're a rugby player, your peak tails off quite quickly. Once you're beyond early 30s, it's a sharper drop off in power. It's a much more gentle reduction in endurance, especially if you continue training. And as you said, experience can counteract that. So you do see a lot of people still doing better races, particularly the really long ones, the 100s, the 200s, as they get older, because the experience and the execution can keep improving even as they slow down marginally. But if they can work out how to train better, maybe they didn't practice hiking before, now they do, and they can use that more effectively, the fitness is not going to matter as much there. Instead, it's, are you just doing better tactics and dealing with problems better? And I think that's part of the fun of it. And it's part of the thing that I love about the sport, is it is a little bit more cerebral. It's not just survival of the fittest, of who is the quickest person here, who's got the highest VO2 max. Let's just give them the award at the beginning. It's who can race the best. Yeah. And that keeps being interesting forever. And yeah, different challenges come up as you age. The one I notice the most is it's harder to stay uninjured. My body picks up things a little bit quicker. The recovery is a little bit slower, so I have to be more mindful about that, adjust what I'm doing in training, and then on race day, make sure that I'm using all that experience. Basically, if I do all the stuff I say in the book, I will have a great race. Yeah. It's still difficult to do that. A lot of the ideas are very simple, but not easy to do. They are hard to do in practice, and I will still make mistakes. But like I said earlier, my aim is that on my bad day, it's still a good race because I problem solve and fix things and use that experience well.
What does it feel like putting it out there? Is it a sense of, okay, it's gone. I've done it now. I don't have to continue thinking about it, or
no. If anything, it makes me more focused on the stuff that's in the book. Partly because right now the book comes out in the US in the next couple of weeks. It'll be physically available, I think, at the beginning of July, and a little bit later in other parts of the world, I think. But for me, it's just stuff I was talking about all the time in coaching. It's things that I talk about on podcasts for decades, that I've written about in Ultrarunning magazine and Trail Runner magazine and things like that. So it's just core things that I noticed were not necessarily being done perfectly in general, and certain ways that I'd explain things that still people go, now I get it. Maybe they knew there was something to do there, but they didn't know how to do it. So what was the practical things you can think about in the moment? So from my perspective, it was just trying to clarify all that, put it down. Yeah, part of that is a legacy thing, but it's mainly just how can I explain all this stuff in a way that lasts a bit longer than a podcast? If I have an amazing podcast discussion and I think I've just really explained that well, that's going to be so helpful. After a few weeks, no one's ever going to listen to that podcast again. At least with a book, it's the kind of thing you can keep coming back to and say, okay, well, I remember I read that chapter before my race, but I don't think I did it well enough. They reread it. And then the next race, they go, okay, now it gives me better perspective of how I do that better or what I did wrong last time. So it's definitely that ability to make it more long lasting and useful ongoing. But also part of it is, as a coach, if I put out my thoughts and my philosophy of how to do things, then people know what they're getting if they come to me for coaching too. Instead of just, they Google a coach, they see a little bit of my website, but they don't really know what I'm about. This way, people can understand much more about the way I do things. And also I can reach a lot more people. I can only coach about 40 people at a time. With the book, I can reach thousands of people to get that information across.
So I'll go out there, I'll read part of your book, I'll read a chapter and I'll think, man, this is something I want to practice in the race. Go out there and give it a go. And then come back and reread that chapter and go, but that's not what he said at all, because now I have different insights. And then when you read that chapter again, you bring that new insight to it. That's when your learning really starts to accelerate.
Yeah. Again, it's that mindfulness, like in your training and racing, you think about how you're doing it. What can you learn? What were the sensations? What was your thought process as you did something well? How do you replicate that? As something went wrong, how do you avoid that, or what are the warning signs? But a lot of people, probably most, there's some element of learning by doing. If I get a brand new runner, and let's say they've done road racing and marathons, but they've never done an ultra, they've got some good experience there. They've trained, they know what running feels like. But a lot of the things I'll be describing in the book are still going to be new to them. And no matter how many times you say it to someone, it's not the same as going through it themselves. So this is something where it's helping them hopefully go along that learning curve faster, but you're not going to go from beginner to expert just by reading a book. You need to be able to then put it in practice and learn and think about it over, to be honest, years. These are skills that don't come easily, even if they are simple concepts.
You have made it seem simple because it's information dense. You've packed a lot of stuff into very short, easily readable chapters, and then, there's no fluff.
Good. I was hoping there'd be no fluff. Once you get near the end of it and the publisher's saying, you need this many words, I'm like, I don't want to just put crap in there for the sake of it. So I tried to say, they wanted about 10% more words than I put in there. Yeah. And I said, no, this is it. I think that covers things well. I don't want to put in unnecessary stuff. And obviously I don't cover everything possible in ultra running. This is more a guide to how you put things into practice. And it has core concepts for training, for racing, for longevity. But there's plenty of books out there that are just, marathon training physiology, and that will apply to ultras. There's books out there that are telling you more about maybe crewing and pacing and nutrition. And, it's not going into everything to the nth degree. There's plenty of sports science in there, but it is more the art of how you put it into practice. And particularly the things that I notice seem to make the biggest difference. So it's not everything, because some things I think most people get quite quickly on their own, but it's particularly things that maybe someone I've been coaching for decades, or I've been coaching for, let's say, a decade, but they've been running for many more years, and there's still things they're learning. It's those kind of messages that I was trying to get across in the book.
It's on my shelf now, and I think everybody who aspires to doing well at the sport is going to be a go-to over the coming years. Thanks for putting it out there.
Well, and actually, just one thing to add there. I didn't want it to be too dry. Every point that I make, every chapter has at least one story. Yes. Some of them are my stories. We mentioned some of the ones from Western States. Some of them are other famous, well-known ultra runners who've achieved a lot and have been in the sport for a long time, like the Courtney Dauwalter example I gave you. There's lots of other big-name ultra runners. There's about 10 different people I've got in there with their stories. Most of them, if you've been in the sport a few years, you probably know their names already. But these are people who've achieved stuff, and it's how did they do that? And the people that I know, where I had a topic that I was covering, and I thought, I know someone who does that well, or I know how they did that or dealt with that in a race. And then I interviewed them for it to make a story about it, just to put it in a bit more perspective and hopefully make it hit home more than just here's the theory, but also seeing it with a story that explains that more.
This is how it worked in practice. What was your best Comrades time?
Yeah, so I'm not a super fast guy. I'm not one of these 2:15 marathoners. My best is still 2:32 on a normal course. I've done some faster downhill ones, but I can still do about that if I'm well trained. A couple of years ago, I did a 2:33. So at Comrades, I've had a silver medal every year apart from the last one. That was the Wally Hayward medal, so the sub 6 hour finish. And I did that I did a 5:57. That was my goal. A gold medal, top 10. I just don't have the speed that those guys have. I'd need to be going, I'd need a fast marathon. I need a 2:20 marathon to have a shot with that. But to go under 6 was my big goal. Yeah, ever since they introduced the Wally Hayward medal, I really wanted one. So it meant so much to get one. Yeah. But, good thing, I don't actually mention this story in the book, but it's not guaranteed the whole way. When I was 10K in, I'd run down poly shorts and I was starting to do the climb after that. It was on a down run. I was not feeling awesome. I was thinking my legs are a bit tired. I'm not running quite as quick as I need to. So I was starting to think, I don't think 6 hours is going to happen today. I don't think I'm capable of it if I'm tired 10K in. So I had to adjust and fix things, not panic, not hyper focus on the outcome, focus on the process, and just get into a good rhythm. And that kept the pace up enough that in the final kilometers, by 5K out, I knew I was going to break 6. It's just by how much. But for most of the day, it didn't look possible. And so that ability to stay motivated, to not just give up and say, oh, I'll jog it in, 7.5, still a silver. That's easy from here. I did not want to have that as be my second option. My second option would be, okay, well, my next best is 6:01. Can I break 6:01 even if I can't break 6 hours? And it's moving that target to still be the best possible on the day.
Yeah.
And as you get near the end of a race, when you've got other people around, racing people is one of the best ways to push yourself. So whether it's a trail race and you're all going super slowly and mainly walking, or whether it's a road race and everyone's moving pretty fast at a 6-hour pace at Comrades, you're just trying to pick people off. You're trying to stick with the person who's still moving well, not let them pull away from you. But that meant a lot to me to do that sub-6. And hopefully I can do a sub-6 next year. But if I don't, I'm going to use it as my motivation to train well. I'll then do the process as well as I can, and I'll see what's possible near the end. And it's not going to be a million miles off that, but it would be nice to make it be my fastest one. Have you done many Comrades? I mean, as a South African ultra runner, you have to have done it.
I've done two. I've done two. I only done the two because I got so tired of people saying to me, oh, you've run that on trail, but have you run Comrades yet? And I was like, and I'll do it. And the first one was really begrudgingly because of this whole attitude. But honestly, I really enjoyed it. I don't like running road a whole lot. Just it's the atmosphere of Comrades and the crowds and yeah, it's an absolute celebration of
running. It's
running.
the most similar to a trail style of road run because of the vibe of it and the camaraderie. A lot of road races is a little bit, everyone's in their own bubble and they're ignoring everyone and not talking. It has the trail vibe that everyone wants to chat. Being an international runner, I have a blue bib on every year. And people just will, be running behind me and go, oh, thank you for coming to the country. Thank you for coming to Comrades. It's just that really nice vibe of we're all in it together that is such an essential element of the trail community too.
For me now, it is trying to continue racing for as long as possible. But that sense of mastery, of just continuously looking for how to improve your experience of running, not necessarily get quicker, but just how do you improve the experience? How do I stay?
I would say a better phrase there, rather than getting better, is growing in the sport, because you can't keep getting faster forever. That's an impossibility. But you can grow. You can find new challenges. You can do certain things better. You can do a longer race or a different type of race or an international race if you've never done that. It gives you so many options. Running is a very varied sport. This is a sport that has a track 1,500 meters and a mountain 250 miler as the same thing. If you're playing most sports, they're almost identical in every format. If you're playing basketball, it's the same thing everywhere. If you're playing football, soccer, it's basically the same thing everywhere, just the temperature maybe changes a bit. But in this, you've got so many options. And part of the stuff at the end of the book about the longevity is think of yourself as an athlete, not an ultra runner, not a trail runner, but give yourself other options. So maybe as you age, you include more cycling, maybe some bike races. Maybe you include some distances and styles of race you haven't done before. But you have all these options. You're only limited by what you think you're limited by. And so it's really helpful, I think, to think of yourself as an athlete, and it gives you so many more avenues you can pursue to grow and enjoy the general sport. And the sport, I'd say here, is endurance, not just running.
Hiking is beginning to play more and more of a role in my life, and hiking with a big pack on, up steep stuff pays off. It comes back to the...
It does. Well, one of the examples I used towards the end of the book is Anton Krupicka. So he was known predominantly as a runner. He'd won Leadville and an amazing runner, but he'd get a lot of injuries, and then he's forced to do some cycling just to recover from that. And then he had a kind of mental switch, which was rather than he's doing cycling because he can't do running, he decided to think of himself as a mountain athlete. A mountain athlete can go mountain biking. A mountain athlete can go climbing in the mountains, as well as running and hiking even, because he didn't really consider hiking as valid because he could run everything. But once he started doing that, I think he enjoyed the sport more because it wasn't limiting him. And it also meant fewer injuries because he could not just stick to this one thing rigidly, and he could adjust things and fit in the stuff that's maybe easier on his body to allow himself to do more things. And in particular, he still does huge amounts of volume, but it's just more varied than it used to be. And he thinks of himself as a mountain athlete versus just a runner, which in terms of the identity is easier to stick to, because if you pick up an injury, you can still do other elements of that instead of just thinking you're not yourself anymore.
I could carry on this discussion for a very long time. I think this is a good place to end it. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much, Fred.
I hope to bump into you when you're out here running Comrades next year.
Yeah, I've got to come for a few more because that's number 9. I've got to do number 10, get the green number, and I've got to at least run with the green number once. So that's at least number 11. So I will be visiting South Africa many more times, definitely.
I tell my Comrades runners, once you've got the green number, you put it in a frame and you put it in your bar. You never run in that number because once 11 becomes 20, and that's just what it is.
That is the danger, but also I'm 45. I could do 20. I'm happy with that.